Knoxville Civil War Roundtable. Now, this presentation will be given today by Tim Vane, and he's Director of Community Activities. And he will discuss the mission and initiatives of the roundtable itself, but I'm sure he will be willing to answer other questions related to that as well. And I know all of us, if we're historians, know that the Civil War absolutely affected East Tennessee in some very radical ways. We didn't have a Shiloh fought here or anything, but boy, we sure were occupied and we sure had a lot of skirmishes. And so, Tim, I'm hoping you'll share some of that information with us today. And with no further ado, let me introduce to you Tim Vane.
So on behalf of Tammy Burrows, who is our president, I would like to thank you, Randall and Jim, for inviting me here today. I am also joined with two other members of the Roundtable, George Lane, who is a past president and has been with the Roundtable for almost as long as the Roundtable has been in existence, and Jerry Burke and his lovely wife, Lynn. Jerry serves with me on a committee that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So this is the story of the Knoxville Civil War Roundtable. Now, we were established in 1983. So we just celebrated our 40th anniversary months ago. And our mission, as the board says, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit, educational forum for promotion of knowledge, commemoration, and preservation of our American Civil War heritage. That's what we're all about. That motivates everything that we do. And as you see, a lot of times people have mission statements, but sometimes, you know, in the day-to-day, year-to-year scrum of life, you kind of lose sight of those things. And a mission statement should drive what you do, and this has become very important to us over the course of the last several months. Our fiscal year is July through June, so we just turned into the 2024, even though the calendar says 2023. For us, it's 2024, and as treasurers know, fiscal years are important things. And we have 14 members on our governing board, and anytime you happen to be in Knoxville and you're on the Kingston Pike near North Shore, and it's 6:30 on the second Tuesday of the month, you are always welcome to come and join us. We'd love to have you. We have an open invitation. Now, I think sometimes when you talk about clubs, it's valuable to have a sense of who you are. And statistics can inform who you are. They don't necessarily drive decisions, but they inform decisions. And as I was talking about the mission statement, one of the things we have done recently is to start to take a look at who we are statistically and see what we can learn from all of that. And what we've seen recently is that we have 147 paid members. Now, that's at the end of 2023. In 2019, before COVID hit, we were around 260. So there was a big drop off, not necessarily because of people being sick and dying, but there just became a reluctance to be in crowds. And so we have to work hard to try and get those folks back. We cost $25 a year for a single membership and $40 for a family, and that hasn't changed. And I don't know what your challenges are, but at some point in time, while it's unpopular, you have to rethink what things cost, because inflation has reared its ugly head and money doesn't get you what it used to get you, and consequently it's hard to fulfill your mission if you don't have the resources to do it. But from time to time, that can be a painful discussion to have with the folks in your organization. We average about 80 attendees per meeting, which isn't bad. If you can get fully half of your membership to show up for any one time, I guess that's probably pretty good. And what also is good is to see people willing to step up. So from a percentage perspective, of the people on the board, of the people who show up on the meeting, virtually a quarter of them have been on the board. So people who have been on the board understand how difficult it is to have a civic organization keep it up and running low over these many years. And George, as a past president, would probably talk about the necessity of having people want to be on the board, because you need new ideas after a while. You can't have the same people over and over again. You get stale. So having that membership turnover is something that's really important to everybody. Interestingly enough, too, and I don't mean this as, this is just a statistical fact. I mean, almost 90% of our membership right now is on Medicare. So we're not exactly a bunch of spring chickens, right? I mean, I
60 is the new 40.
And Jim, let's go with that. That's absolutely true, but you'll see this has impact. I mean, remember, statistics inform. They don't make decisions for you, but in order to have good decisions, you have to have good information. And so we'll talk a little bit about what this means later on. This was actually a surprise to me. 68% of our members are male, 32% are female, which is actually higher than I thought. I would have thought it would have been 3 out of 4 would have been male, and if we got anywhere close to a quarter, that would be great. Now, I can't tell you from month to month how many women actually show up, but at least they're on the books and they pay dues. In short, we are old, male, and white. Now that's not bad, it's just what the statistics say we are. Now we have...
a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the next to the last, 68%.
Right.
Over at the end, it says no POC.
Oh, no persons of color.
There are a couple of 3 who have traditionally attended,
Right.
but I'm not sure.
Right, so, but almost from a statistical perspective, it's virtually zero.
Versus not.
Okay, I just didn't know what POC.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I should have said that, right. Persons of color, you know, whatever, non-white, whatever their ethnicity happens to be. And so what do? Well, consistent with the mission, our biggest event of the year is our Living History Weekend held at Fort Dickerson, now in November, generally the second weekend in November after Veterans Day. It used to be earlier in the year, but you know, we had struggled. Well, let's face it, we're in Knoxville, and you know, when you want to do anything in the fall, there's this big 800-pound gorilla called the University of Tennessee football team. If you're lucky, this date that we do this happens to fall on an away weekend. If you are not lucky, and last year it happened to be when Unit T was at home against a university you may have heard of called the University of Georgia. From what I'm told, it was a fairly important game. And so there we are banging away with cannons because Fort Dickerson overlooks Neyland Stadium. And the cannons got drowned out by what was ever going on in the stadium. So we have to be careful about that. But the battle that we are commemorating took place on November 15th, 16th, 1863. So we wanted to get it as close to the anniversary date as possible. That doesn't mean it's not going to change ever again, but that's what it is now. Also in 2015, consistent with the mission, we started a Dot Kelly preservation grant. Dot Kelly is a tour de force in Knoxville for trying to preserve and commemorate the Civil War in and around Knoxville. And so what the board decided to do was to name this grant after her, which is $500 to an individual or group who comes up with a good idea that does one of those 2 things, preserve or commemorate. And the award winners have been St. Mary's Roman Catholic Elementary School in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. One year decided that they would have a commemoration of the souls of soldiers who died in the Civil War at the National Cemetery. And they brought flowers and they put them on all the headstones that they could find from the Civil War. Conversely, we've also had people do preservation ideas, such as building cabinets to preserve artifacts. Your friends at the Longstreet Museum in Russellville in Hamilton County have been a 2-time award winner because the money that we had helped them build racks that helped them preserve some of their artifacts. So it is open to anybody, you folks included, if you want to participate in the process. It's a rigorous process. It's a 1-page application. It shouldn't take you very long to come up with an idea, and then you can go into the mix with everybody else. Now, this year, the board approved something new. We have decided to do the same thing with the Doc Kelly Preservation Grant with JROTC units at local schools. And I'll get into that a little bit in a minute. So one of the reasons why I'm here is, as a board, we decided that, you know, there's enough of us that are out here. When I say enough of us, I'm talking about civic organizations that have a specific mission in a local area. The Knoxville Civil War Roundtable, Smoky Mountain Historical Society, the Jefferson County Historical Society. There are a lot of people in organizations, but we're isolated. We're all by ourselves. What if we were to put a string through all of those organizations so we could know about each other and help each other? And so while we were setting up, we did a deal. I don't know if your board has to approve this or not, but Randall graciously agreed to allow us to link to your website, and you can link to our website, and that way we can start reading more about what each other are doing and to contact each other if we have good ideas for doing things or if you need help in doing something. But we should be all in this together, I think, in East Tennessee. And since May of 2022, we've reached, I hate that phrase, we reached out. We contacted multiple organizations, some of which I met, and some of which include the JROTC. Because it's amazing, I've given some classes at JROTC school days, and it's amazing how much they don't know about their history. And their instructors say the same thing. There is a real challenge, I think, to teach our youth about American history the way it probably ought to be taught. And so having people come in with a different perspective who know what they're talking about to provide youngsters a different perspective is probably a good thing. Now we've also, with that Doc Kelly Preservation Grant, there's one thing I think we can safely say about the youth of America is, Madam, would you hold that instrument in your right hand? Just hold it up. Yes, you, right here.
In purple.
Yeah, that is a what? Cell phone. Thank you. Maybe you could put that down. One thing our youths are good at are things that are electronic. Now, one of the things that we are trying to get, he probably ought to be able to come up here and teach this better than I can. But one of the things we're trying to do with JROTC is to get those youngsters and their computer skills to do something related to Civil War history. You know, geolocate battlefields, geolocate Civil War graves and forgotten cemeteries, those kinds of things that can get them excited about history, we think, we hope, and that lend themselves to their skill set, and probably in many cases they don't have to go outside, so they're probably okay with that too. You know, a lot of kids just don't get outside as much as they used to. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you posted. And if you have any youngsters at the high school, community college, middle school who are good at this stuff, they should be eligible to get a Dot Kelly preservation grant. So we've discussed who we are and our statistics and all the rest of it, but here's some of the different threads that are taking place inside the Roundtable. Now, when we did our living history event and a theatrical event with Grant and Lee last year, we decided not to spend any money on advertising. We used social media, we made flyers, we had the members reach out to other people, and lo and behold, we had 170 people at last year's presentation. And then when we went forward into the Living History Weekend, we did the same thing, and the audience didn't drop off from previous years, and we had spent a lot of money for a small organization to advertise, $600, $700 to do all that. The problem is people don't use media the same way as they used to, or use the same media in the same way. So advertising in a newspaper, a concept that all of us are familiar with, and he doesn't have any idea what it is. I'm not talking about you, Jerry, I'm talking about the young man behind.
The young man on his media.
So, yeah, and look, see, so we did all this advertising differently, and it worked, or at least it worked no worse than the previous one did. So we looked at this and said, well, if that's true, what else might be true about the way we were doing business? And this was taking place at just about that same time, that statistical analysis that I put on that first slide. So you have both of these threads coming together to say, if we're old, white, and male, and we don't want to be that forever, then how do we change and start to expand and get our number of women up to 40%? I mean, actively there. Get persons of color. How do we do all of this? And so we decided that we needed to do a top-down review. Now, for all of you who have been in business and been in management, the dreaded words you never want to hear is, okay, it's time to get a vision statement and figure stuff out about how we're going to move forward in the future. And the problem is not necessarily that that's a bad thing to do, it's how it's done. So we got together a little tiger team, and you really have to have one crusty curmudgeon on your little tiger team who is willing to get through all the smoke and mirrors and say, we need to do this faster, we need to do this. And fortunately, we had the perfect guy, because I tend to want to debate things. He said, that's enough, we got to make decisions. So, you know, the two of us together kind of did this about right. And so there was at least I think, so there is an Iowa State University document that talks about how you go through and develop your vision statement, your mission statement, determine your core values. And we did all that stuff in 2 sessions. And it went fairly well. And so as a result of all of that, we came up with what we thought was viable. We briefed the board and we briefed the membership, and it was accepted. Oh, well, okay, so what? When you do all that, you can only get so far. You can develop the vision, the mission, you can do your core values, but then you're gonna have to get to say, okay, what are we really gonna do? And those are strategies. But the strategies, we thought, can't be done by just the same people who develop the strategies. You have to have greater input from across the board, right? Because you don't want this being too inbred. You got to get more people's ideas on how to flesh these things out, right? So we came up with five strategies. And the 5 strategies from top to bottom are coming up with an advertising and promotion of our programs with an emphasis on using social media. Sooner or later, folks, we have to change and get better at social media, right? The second thing we thought was maybe, just maybe, our monthly programs needs to have a greater enhancement. We all love battles and leaders and strategy, but the war was much broader, much deeper, and there was a lot of stories that haven't been told. For example, Madam, your husband goes for whatever side and goes to fight, doing his patriotic duty. Meanwhile, you're left to run the farm with 3 kids between 1 and 9 years old. How did she do that? Those are remarkable stories that you don't hear much of, that we think we need to get more of into what we do. Then we need to have a more effective recruitment strategy that gets us out to people like you to see if you'd be interested in interacting with us, either as a member or not. There's no prohibition about people from Sevier County being member of 2 clubs, right? I mean, it's only $25 for a single, 40 for a couple. We need to get more members engaged in our internal activities. And finally, we didn't really offer tours, Civil War tours. We sit here in East Tennessee within distance of a lot of really interesting battles. Bean Station, Dandridge. Hey, how about this? Fair Garden, right? We haven't spent any time that I'm aware of up here looking at these battles in these valleys up through here. So we're going to look into those kinds of things. As we were telling the membership, here's what we're going to do with regard to strategies, but we need people to help. You know, it's tough sometimes to get people to volunteer, right? But we got 7 people to volunteer in 3 of the 5 committees. Now, the 2 committees that didn't get anybody to sign up for the social media, we kind of backed our way into getting people to sign up for that, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then the fellow who runs our programs has been doing it for 10 years and has done such a good job that I don't think anybody thinks that there's any way they can prove anything, so they just left him alone. He kind of sits up on a pedestal. So if you need a speaker for something related to this period, I'll turn you over to Jim Doncaster, and he can help you a lot. Of the other 3 committees that were left, we had 4 that wanted to be part of the battlefield tour, 1 that wanted to help with internal engagements, and 2 that wanted to join me on the outreach committee, one of whom is sitting right here in Sherry Burke. So that's how, Jim, that's how this happened, is because Jerry decided he was going to be an active member of the committee, and by God, he has done that. We came up with 7 short-term strategies and 8 long-term strategies. Now remember, this is February, March in there. So we figured by the end of 2023, we could do the following things, or we could take a shot at it. And these are the things we did, all right? So the little plus you see after the phrase, that means we did it. The minus means we haven't done it. And the question mark, I'll get to the question mark. Okay, so one of the things we do is we do things like we're doing right now. And we go into schools and we go into residential living facilities and those kinds of things as an outreach effort. That's just where we are, but we gave ourselves a check for that. And then increase media utilization by promoting our Scout Report, which is our monthly newsletter. It's kind of hard to track that, but Where are we on that? You have any idea?
I know I started sharing it on
Yeah.
my own Facebook page,
Right.
and, you know, I've had people come to the meetings now.
So, well, I guess I can change that to a check, huh? I guess you only have to have one in order to say you did it. So, okay. Here's something we're trying to do. We have a lot of old cemeteries in Knoxville. And we have one that's a Confederate cemetery and one that is an historically black cemetery. Each one of which, the Confederate cemetery, as you might suggest, Civil War participants, obviously, 1,600 Civil War Confederate soldiers buried in this particular cemetery. But it doesn't get a lot of attention. And so we thought it would be a good idea to help them clean up the grounds, clean the headstones, and all of those other kinds of things to preserve and commemorate their participation. And oddly, down the street from this cemetery is an old black cemetery where there are 14 members of the U.S. colored troops interred. So we have committed to help those cemeteries keep those plots up so that those veterans are not forgotten irrespective of side. Remember, we are nonpartisan, right? We want to study the war. We don't pick sides, we study the war. We also are trying to start our own minor league farm system of getting people interested in the war. And so we are trying to assist young people in helping create Civil War reenactment units so that they can continue the hobby and continue the interest in studying this period and become eventually future leaders inside the Roundtable. Got to get them while they're young and keep them interested, because the statistics I gave you on the Roundtable, if you go to Civil War reenactment, it's not much different. Kind of fallen out of favor given the current cultural climate and the fact that Hollywood hasn't produced a decent Civil War movie since Gettysburg in 1993. We have failed to interact with one of the black cultural centers in town, but we're going to, I think, probably end up working through the cemetery, Oddfellow Cemetery was the name of the black cemetery, to make that connection. At least that's what we're hoping for. And here's where we kind of backed into the social media. One of the other members on my committee that Jerry's on is actually writing, scripting, and blocking out a advertisement update on the Roundtable. We're going to put it on YouTube. So you all are ahead of us with regard to that, but that's kind of the way we backed into the social media piece of all this. So that was the short-range plan. The long-range plan is just to continue to do this, and at a certain point in time, Jerry and Dick Heiser and I will get together and we'll look at it and we'll see what we need to do and what we need to not do. Stop. Why are we doing all this? Well, if we keep doing what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got, right? And what that means traditionally is, I spelled it wrong. Yes, we are a super club, but really what I meant was a supper club. I mean, that's what people do, and it's fine, that's great, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful venue to meet friends and have dinner and listen to something interesting and provocative about the Civil War, but ultimately, if that's all it is, we're probably going to gradually wither away. So we have to do something. And as the French philosopher Auguste Comte said, you know, demography is destiny. If you don't have the people, sooner or later, you're going to go away. So what do? Well, we become an organization that adds value to everybody we interact with, right? You don't do membership drives just to get people to show up and pay you money. You got to give them a reason to come and be a part of it because they find what you do interesting, thought-provoking, uplifting, inclusive, all of those kinds of things. So that's the road we're on, because virtually every civic group in town, arguably, has a tie back to the Civil War and all of the things that the Civil War caused to happen or not happen. And consequently, we think, seeing as the Civil War is every American's common heritage, is something we can build on. After all, it's in our mission statement. Thank you.
15 years ago now, for the Civil War sesquicentennial, we were the founding group that organized the East Tennessee sesquicentennial. And that included everything from reenactment of Fort Sanders up at Blaine, to having several hundred people come to that one. In the later years, we did a research project to digitize all the members of the 1st Colored Heavy Artillery. They were primarily out of Knoxville. That project is almost finished. We were a 501c3 corporation. Steve Dean, who is on the board, was the director of it for the most of the time. We signed the paperwork about a month ago to officially close that 501c3. But we got wide community participation. The people that are there, they want to hear it. But the level of interest on the part of folks is great. Part of it's politics, part of it's time. But it's getting more and more difficult to get reenactors. And that a lot of the cities don't want us anymore. And they won't let you carry guns. You know, that when I go on a reenactment, I carry Civil War, I carry a 50 caliber pistol, 50 caliber rifle, and a hog leg knife. They don't really want those to come in school, and they think that's all that's coming. So we've got to do a better job of educating the school people, the ROTCs and all, that we're an educational organization. The Revolutionary Sons of the Revolution is doing a major job on marking Revolutionary War graves. We have not really coordinated it. There is a strong Sons of the Confederate veterans who are still waiting for Nathan de Bedford Forrest and Stonewall to be resurrected so that they can come back again. I'm a member was a member of the Sons of Union Veterans, and it's getting very difficult to get members who will come out and talk about it.
You know, I was working with, everybody knows about the town of Farragut in West Knoxville. Okay, it's actually named after David Glasgow Farragut, the famous Civil War general, damned torpedoes full speed ahead. 2 years ago, I started to work with the town hall about the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Campbell Station, which took place on the Kingston Pike in the middle of what is currently Farragut Woods, coming down the pike, and you need to get ready for it. In my mind's eye, I had this, and the battlefield itself was on the Kingston Pike. I mean, that was the middle of the battlefield. And I said to them, wouldn't it be great, shut down the Kingston Pike, have Civil War reenactors redo the battle right there. It'll be memorable. We'll be on the cover of every magazine. The reenactors will show up. It'll be wonderful. And 2 years came, and I kept poking and prodding, and it just died. And we can't close this down. I guess, you could go right out here, but you guys didn't have the Civil War battle right out here. So, to George's point, it's really hard to get people's imaginations excited to the point where they're willing to do something unusual, different. You can't, at at this stage of the game, you can't do a reenactment with actual cannons and rifles and all that stuff, even though they're shooting blanks in their arms, inside a lot of city limits. So we're going to have to be creative, engaging, and consistent in order to be successful, irrespective of what your organization is. Yes, ma'am.
One more question, please.
Is there any way that all of these organizations can get maybe an umbrella organization? There's 2 Buffalo soldiers in a cemetery right up here. A fellow asked me, he said, check on them. He says, we need to put new tombstones up. I checked them. Tombstones that are there are broken beside a tree. I lost his information. I have no way, I don't know who he was. I have no way to get back to him. I've got the information he needs
Huh.
to put the tombstones up, but,
Do they have military headstones?
yeah, the Buffalo soldiers.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, do they have the white?
Well, actually, what was leaning against a tree was, you could tell, but it was really in bad shape.
Right,
But it looked like.
Did
yeah,
it say his name and he was a part of the 26th
You could see part of
Cavalry?
it, you could see parts of it.
Okay. See, that's real, I didn't know that.
Hmm?
You know, I didn't know that, and I bet you a lot of the folks in Knoxville, like at the Beck Cultural Center, which is a center of a lot of African-American activities, I just
think-
wonder if they know that.
I think, what I think it was, it's in the McMahon Cemetery up here at the high school. I think they were probably slaves or former slaves of some of the other people that are buried there. And when they died, they put them, and I don't know where the actual graves are, I just know where the tombstones were. They put them there, but he had the names and everything. Like you said,
I tell you
they
what,
were the buffalo.
if you could get,
The colored buffalo.
you could get Jim or Randall the information and they could send it to me, I'd be more than happy to forward that on to other people.
Well, this fellow that contacted me, he had all the information.
Oh.
He was getting ready to put the tombstones up. And so, and I thought, if I could had an organization, I'd probably remember his name if I could find it.
Yeah.
But this is, and it was social media that we contacted on. We had another situation, and this was a great uncle, now fought in the Civil War, Giles Caton, and his tombstone, it was laying in the middle. So we were trying to get a way to put his tombstone back in, and I didn't realize that the tombstones, the actual, go down in the ground about 24 feet and they're cemented in. Not 24 feet, but 24 and 2 feet down.
Right.
Anyway, I finally got a cousin out of Texas who found somebody that could come, and it wasn't a new tombstone, we just repaired the one that was there. But I couldn't find anybody that could help me do anything with it.
Well, when we were at I spent one of the mornings at the Bethel Cemetery cleaning plaques, name plaques of all the ones that are buried there, and then we started working on individual grave markers. They are mounted on a cement base.
That's,
And I didn't know that.
that's too big name.
But there were several that were sitting next to the base that had obviously fallen off of the base.
So you know what I learned at working at Oddfellow Cemetery is that the University of Tennessee, Knoxville architectural program actually works with the caretaker. See, Oddfellow Cemetery, nobody owns it. So this is a neighborhood guy who's working very hard with scant resources to do something. So UTK is helping. And one of the things that they talk about is how do you do just that? So, are you interested in doing this?
Doing what?
Fixing these tombstones.
The Buffalo Soldiers things, if I could find it, because I think he had already applied to get the new tombstones.
Yeah, okay.
But
Um,
you're one of the Civil War
The-
markers you were talking about.
The one Civil War market that I was talking about,
Yeah,
was my
the-
great uncles, we got it fixed.
Yeah,
We privately,
But the
we,
VA will get you, I think.
no, the VA don't do anything, I tried.
We should talk after this, maybe there's
But-
things we can do.
Yeah, what would be nice to me is if we had a list of people who have some authority at least, or know somebody that, that can do these.
Well, that's where having the link to all these organizations on each other's website.
Yeah, that would help. That would really,
It's a
really,
big
really
help.
help. And another thing, and maybe I shouldn't be mentioning this, why isn't the historical societies and other societies, why don't you have an affiliation with any of the genealogy groups? Because that is where you're going to get the people. For people who are doing research, where you're doing research on your families, especially, I think, the women.
I know exactly the right guy and right couple to give that mission to inside the Knoxville Civil War Roundtable.
And the reason
Right
we're here
here.
is because her great-grandfather was born in Sevier County.
Well, we saw that. Wish all you
And
can.
during COVID, I found the website, and I said, oh, we've been over here to Adler Branch, and we did the James family cemetery, family was James, the James family cemetery east of Gatlinburg, off of 321 Bushes, where you can't read any of the grave markers,
No.
there's 20-something people. Her third great-grandmother died here in 1863. According to the 1860 census, she was at the Harrisburg precinct 12 district.
I know where
think,
that's
which is
at.
over by the Harrisburg Bridge.
That's the Harrisburg Bridge, yes.
So that's, so Tim's like,
So
Oh, yeah.
you two have alter egos with each other.
but the same, it makes the genealogy makes a personal connection.
It does, and you've got to have, I think you've got to have a personal connection to get involved with anything. You've got to have some reason, some,
Only is heaven.
and the thing
Our
about it,
creativity to do things like that.
but if you're looking at your family, you're automatically going to get interested in the history. If you're automatically going to get interested in what's going on.
There's time for two more comments, and then we'll
Sorry, I'll
carry
shut
on.
up.
You're first.
Have you guys reached out to the DAR organizations all over Knoxville? There's a lot. And what,
A DAR.
Dollar American
No, I know that. I know.
oh, here's the,
I'm
here's
just
the
trying to
connection.
understand the connection.
All right, yeah, you know Revolutionary War.
Right.
But do you know how much historical data is kept within those organizations? And the DAR in Washington? Anyway, the DAR, while you have, of course, you have the daughters of a Revolutionary War. You know, the husbands can't get involved that much, but they can get involved in the Civil War. If you offer to go in and do your presentation to each DAR organization, you're going to get some input, because a lot of those women, their husbands and them do reenactments. And so if you get into doing the DAR presentations or the SARS, you know, you're going to get in there. And each of these DAR organizations, we are interconnected. As a matter of fact, I came here to the Historical Society and met the registrar for the Sevierville DAR. I am now in training to become the new registrar for the Sevierville. So,
Stephen Clack,
yes, no, Spencer Clack.
I'm Spencer Clack.
Yeah, and I am deep into genealogy and stuff like that, and also with the Jefferson County. But, yeah, and there's also websites, you know about the Smoky Ken and all this other stuff, you know, and once you get your foot in the door, my great-grandparents, great-grandfathers and stuff like that, I live over in Jefferson County, but I came up here to Sevierville for the DAR because my ancestors were born up there between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, before it became a park. So I have a lot of history up there. Another one though, you've heard of Lona Cemetery? You have? Okay, I'm from them. I'm descended from them in Knoxville. I was born at Fort Sanders. My first, one of my families, the Lones, are some of the first Tennessee settlers. So I'm going to be getting that over there. So, yeah, I got a lot of history.
Something we need to,
Yes.
Yeah, once you start getting into the genealogy side of it, you'll get going.
Yeah, that's what
Okay,
I think.
one last comment, George.
Let me make a couple of comments. There was a change in the state law a couple of years ago on cemeteries, abandoned cemeteries. There is a small pool of money statewide to do it. It's almost not worth the effort of trying to get in and do it. I've been to probably 10 dedications of Revolutionary soldiers in the last couple of years. We did the Stephen Holston chapter in Knoxville. We're looking at trying to mark every Revolutionary soldier's grave in the nation. We did Blount County because I was president, and from Blount County, that one kind of got first. We've gone from about 85 known soldiers to about 149, because a huge number of them, we can prove they were Revolutionary soldiers, but we can't prove they don't have a stone. So we're making arrangements to do those. I've been involved in a couple other cemeteries, a black cemetery down in Friendsville that a lady keeps wanting to clean up, and I went out and see it last week, a couple of times this spring. To get into it, I got to drive through the chicken coops because there's a fighting chicken farm that is getting over on it, and maybe a fighting dog or two there, and it's about that high. And it was cleaned up a number of years ago, and that you'll go in and clean these up, and the family get all excited, and then nobody shows up again for 10 years, and the trees are this big. If you're looking at Civil War, Richard Holmes, who has been in the Sons of the Union Veterans, does an awful lot of volunteer marking, putting the stones in, and is very good. We need to get him in the Roundtable on doing it, but he probably has marked 100 in the last 2 years of putting the stones in, where somebody identifies and goes to it. So there are things like this going on. We've talked about trying to set up a 501c3 to collect money to keep some of these cleaned, because people are always leaving money, and a lot of the ones that are in really bad shape go back to Civil War days or before. Went to look at one last week down in Loudoun County that is of a family that's owned it since the Revolution. They're keeping it up, but most of them are not kept up, and particularly when they get into subdivision. And you'll walk into some of them, there'll be stacks of tombstones. You don't have to tell the difference between a Union and a Confederate tombstone?
Yes.
The Union has a round top and the Confederate has a slanted top, so they won't sit on it. But that's just a little side point there. But there are groups that are working on it. The Civil War is not as well organized as the DAR is a bunch, and the SAR, well, let's say we've marked over 100. We're doing Knox County ones right now, and trying to clean some. But your problem is not getting a group to come together and do it the first time. Your problem is getting the money to pay for it the second, third, fourth year on down the road.
Maintenance. Well, we try to keep our meetings to an hour, and so I would like to say we can continue this discussion through the food that we will be serving in just a second. And Tim, but I want to thank you again and the Roundtable for showing us what you're doing. And I think almost any organization would profit from the process you've just completed. And probably our own organization would be one of those that could profit from that. So thank you again for doing that, and please stay with us, if you will, for our refreshments, and we can continue this discussion. So thank you very much for coming. Let's give Tim another hand.